Well, hello, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this episode. Welcome back to Snapshots and Stories. I'm your host, Paul Owen. So, have you ever been out looking about in the night sky or the day sky, I guess, depending on phases that we're going to be talking about? Looking up at the sky and seeing these wonderful auroras that we've had. We've seen some solar eclipses, we've seen some lunar eclipses, we see beautiful sunsets, sunrises, moonsets, moonrises. And the most common thread of all of those types of events is the moon itself. Now, have you ever wondered why maybe sometimes you take a photo of the moon and it's either a big white blown out disk, or perhaps it's just so blurry you can't really enjoy it? Well, there's a lot of things that can cause that sort of thing. And today we're going to mystify that, or demystify it rather, and show you how to get an excellent shot of the moon. And we're going to cover things in certain phases of the moon, how you can take shots of it in whether it be just a tiny little version of it with a really cool foreground, or even right into those deep shots of those lovely craters and interesting features that are on the moon. So I'm going to start and talk to you today about this, and I'm going to show you illustrations of photographs that I've taken of the moon and explain to you basically what it is that you've seen. So let's get started with some photos. Okay, so here's a photograph that I took of the moon. Just a very, very simple moon in the sky. Nothing special about this. You'll notice that the sky itself is blue, and it's going into that beautiful pinkish kind of color. That time of night is when it's just starting to get dark, going into the blue hour, maybe just a little beyond, and we start to see those gorgeous colors, and the moon is rising up in the east. So this is a really simple shot. So if those are the kind of shots that you like to shoot, we'll cover a little bit how to shoot those ones. Then there's ones that you maybe decide that, oh, you know what, I would like to have a really nice foreground shot and have something very interesting in the front. So again, here's a shot of a crescent moon. This is shot in Springfield, near my home in Hampton. And it's a gorgeous shot of these bales of hay in the field, and this land fog that's coming up just as the sun's setting and the moon is dropping behind there. Again, that's another type of a shot to consider. But look, I want you to notice particularly as we go through these, take a look at the size of the moon, because some moons will be bigger than others, some moons will be smaller than others. And there's an interesting thread to all this, which we'll get to a little later. Perhaps you like to shoot these astronomical events, lunar eclipses, solar eclipses. Now, solar eclipse obviously is based on the sun, but it's actually the moon covering the sun. So the moon has a big play in that eclipse as well. So again, if you look, this was just on March the 3rd this year, and this was the partial lunar eclipse. This is all I could get of it before we got clouded out, and we didn't get to see the whole thing. If you were in Eastern Canada, you would have got the whole thing. But just the different phases of the moon as the moon starts to, or the Earth actually starts to throw its shadow on the moon in this lunar eclipse. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, we'll talk about how and the best way to get shots like that. Also, very specific moons. Now, this was the strawberry moon that I shot a while back. And this one is quite interesting in that what you're looking at there is Partridge Island, and this is in St. John. And I'm looking across part of the Bay of Fundy to see this island and to catch this moon rising. I was very fortunate to have caught some clouds with the moon, because particularly interesting, I think, is to have some clouds in your shot and as the moon tries to break through, because it just creates such an interesting mood to be able to see this kind of a thing when you're shooting this shot. Now, this was a very planned out shot, and we'll cover a little bit how to plan and how to make this look like this. In fact, if this shot was I enjoyed it so much, I sent it out to a magazine, and it actually got posted in one of Canada was at that time Canada's only astronomical magazine, and so they want to use it for a segment in their magazine, and it was it was a thrill. Of course, I said yes, that would be lovely to have that put up there. So there's that shot. So you just never know what can happen with your moon shots. Now, maybe you're the type that, you know what, I'm more interested in the moon because I want to study, you know, the features of the moon. I want to know about the craters. How did the moon evolve? I want to either look at a very detailed, impressive look at the moon and all of its different phases to look at all the different features. And maybe I even want to study it and maybe get into a little bit of scientific study and spend some time on that. So there's another way to capture the moon in this way. So there's a lot of different ways to capture the moon. And this is just some of them. Or maybe you're just somebody who likes to be out for a walk and you happen to have a cell phone. And this is actually in Hampton, this place called Spooner Island. And it's a little place I go for wildlife photography and for some walks. And I just happened to see one of these moons, as I showed you in an earlier photo, where the moon was just rising. And of course, we've got that beautiful blue, that pink sky that goes along with it. Just makes it absolutely wonderful colors. And then you can, beautiful foreground with the trees. So this is all compositional things, that we'll talk about. But this was just a simple cell phone. You'll notice, by the way, that the moon is totally blown out in this shot. And there's a reason for that, and we'll cover that too, because perhaps when you're shooting your moon pictures, all you get is that white disk in the sky, and you really don't get a lot of detail. So there are some approaches for that. Now, so this whole segment is really about catching the moon with one shot. There's many ways to shoot the moon, like I'm showing you here. But I'm going to focus on the one that I think is most impressive and most people, as photographers, certainly like to take. And they like to take that classic moon rising up over something with its glorious colors that it is, with its magnificent size and all that sort of thing. So those are the shots I think that we're going to cover a bit. And I'll spend some time and tell you how to get all that. So, but before we do, let me see if I can bring this up here. So there we go. So this little slide show I'm going to show you is all about how to catch the full moonrise in one shot. Now, when we think about some of these moon shots or moonrises, lots of times people are saying, well, the only way to do that, because the moon is so bright and the sky or the foreground is so dark, is to do these bracketed shots, almost like an HDR shot, where you're overexposing one, underexposing another, and then getting what they consider a correct exposure, and then blending all three together, and then you get this dynamic shot that has all that in there. Well, if we shoot the way I'm going to explain how you to do this, you can do this in one shot. You don't need to go through that where you got to take it in and then blend photos and that sort of thing, if you're not someone who's really comfortable with doing some of that type of editing. So during a non-full moon, or it doesn't matter really, to expose a moon without blowing it out will cause the foreground to be too dark. So if I didn't have this moon coming up at a full moon phase, then what's going to happen is it's going to be dark before the moon rises by times. And if that's the case, then what you will have will be a silhouette of this tower. Now, this grass in this tower, or field in this tower, I wouldn't have been able to see if that moon had been up, because if I had the moon had been up and I wanted to see this, that moon would be so blown out, it would just be a big ball in the sky. You wouldn't know if it was the moon or the sun. You'll notice, by the way, there's Jupiter and 4 of its Galilean moons up there. So that was one of the reasons why I took that shot. But in any event, this is not the type of situation that we want to get the shots in one take. This is it here. So the best time to shoot the moon is during a full moon rise. So basically, as the sun is setting in the west, the moon is rising in the east at a true full moon. And so when that happens, there's still plenty of light to light up your foreground interest, so that you're able to actually get a shot of that beautiful moon rising, and you still have a nice foreground, whatever that happens to be. I'll show you a variety of foregrounds as we go. So you can set up your composition the way that you like. So this is actually very, very important. Now I'm just going to go one slide further. There we go. So this particular one is important, and this is part of the first part of the procedure you need to understand to get a really, really nice full moon rise with a nice foreground, is why it happens the way that it happens. So when we're in a true full moon, in other words, when the moon is going to rise at its fullest state, which should be either full or almost full, what's going to happen is this is the line, the horizon line, and the moon is going to rise in the east. Let's say this is the eastern side, and this is our horizon. This is the ground we stand on. This is daylight. This is nighttime. And then over here is the sun. It says sunrise, but let's say that's a sunset. So the sun's going to be setting in the west. The moon will be rising in the east. Now, the reason that you're able to get the light on your foreground during this type or during this cycle rather, is that we're going to be entering civil twilight. So civil twilight is basically the blue hour. That's where the sun has just dipped below, somewhere around 6 degrees below the horizon. And now we're starting to see that blue glow in the sky. And I'll show you that in a moment. During that time, because we're standing here looking at the moon, everything that's on the moon side of the earth, the east side, is still going to be lit because we still have a fair bit of light coming from the sun, even though it's not direct anymore. But it's certainly enough that as that moon rises, our interests in our foreground will still be visible. So there's different phases of the moon, and I'm not going to get into a scientific study on this. I just want to show you some of them. But it's basically the moon, when it goes into its full moon phase, which is phase number 5, it's full moon here, is always the opposite side of where the sun is. So as that moon rises in the east and the sun sets in the west, this is why we have that blue hour. And that's really important to know that if you're going to plan a moonshot, a full moon rise, don't take the one that's the day before that might be 96% or 97%, because the time that moon rises the day before will be 50 minutes different than when it's going to rise the next night. So it's got to be exactly on the true full moon rise to be able to get that moon in one shot. So let me just escape out of that. Oh, stuck here now. There we go. There we go. All right, so that's important to know to this point is the phases of the moon. Now let me just move forward here. There we go. All right. So basically what you're seeing here is a planned full moon rise. And this particular full moon rise, you can see it's a little different size than some of the other photos I had showed you. This is going to be important, and we're going to cover why the different sizes of the moons are there and what it is with the equipment that we're going to need and why we need these certain lenses to be able to get the shots that we want. So this one here, this is like I was talking to you about the blue hour. So you can see that everything here is pretty much starting to look blue, and that's because the sun has already set behind us. And so it's still casting some light, but as that light gets lower, things start to take on this blue cast. And that's why people love to go out and shoot in what they call the blue hour. And this is the effect of what you'll get during that time. Now, this particular shot is in St. John. It's at McLaren Beach. And I'm looking over to the east side of the city. And I'm also looking at Partridge Island again. And there's a little lighthouse on Partridge Island. So that light that you see right there is the lighthouse flickering back at me, because I wanted that in the shot as well as the moonrise. And I knew that this was actually going to be low tide. All the elements were perfect. So I got this gorgeous seabed that's still quite wet and reflective. So we're able to get this beautiful reflection of the moon's light. Here we got the beautiful reflection of the lighthouse light in there. And because I'm so far away from that landscape, the moon actually looks really quite big to that landscape. So this shot, I was very pleased to get this one, and this is one of the things that you can do, and the kind of light that you will get during those full moon rises at this blue hour. Very important. Now here's another plan shot. Now this one is out in the Bay of Fundy, and this place is out in Gardener's Creek, and which is it's just a little bit south of St. Martin's, New Brunswick. And this area here is called Split Rock, which is pretty self-explanatory. So basically there's this big split between these two rocks, and only twice a year will this moon rise right in the center of that rock. Now, the reason that the moon's not in dead center is because as the moon was rising, there was a bank of clouds here, and it didn't start to pop through them till I got about this height. So I got the shot still, but it wasn't the shot I wanted, but I was still quite pleased with it. So again, as you can see, there's enough light to light up those rocks, the trees, and of course that hard, rocky, dark surface that we see at the edge of the bay. So again, a perfectly planned shot. And you're going to notice too, with a lot of these shots, if you can get it right at the lowest part of the horizon, which is, of course, sea level is the lowest it'll ever get, the moon actually takes on this absolutely wonderful color. And it does because refracted light. So it's like when our sun sets, and we get all those glorious sunset colors. It's because as the sun's starting to set, and it's the light that it's sending to us is being shot through the atmosphere, and it's being refracted, and it changes colors. I won't get into the scientific side of it, but that's basically what happens. So it's the same with our sun's rises. When we look at those glorious sunrise colors in the morning, and the moon takes on that same thing. So because the moon is not the sun and it's not the source of light, it's a light source that's actually taking light on, it's reflected. It doesn't obviously get as bright as the sun. So, but it is bright enough that we can see a lot of detail, and we can see those beautiful colors that are cast. Now, as the moon gets higher in the sky, now, and this is kind of important to understand, what happens is it's starting to elevate above the atmosphere, and then that's when you start to see it turn white. It's going to turn from that gorgeous orange to more of a pale yellow, and eventually it'll turn white as it gets higher up. So if you're taking your full moon shots and you didn't catch it during the full moon rise, you can still get interesting shots like this one, for example. It's just a matter of finding an element that you want to shoot it over and above. And you can still get a beautiful moon shot, but you have to remember that you're not going to have those refracted colors. So the moon is going to change itself in terms of color. And depending on where you are, you're going to start to lose that ability to make the moon look huge. Now this one here is one that was shot purposefully in St. John, and I wanted to shoot this one here because I wanted to show Mother Nature versus industry, and that's kind of what the theme of this shot was. So we have this absolutely wonderful full moon rising over the horizon. It was a low enough horizon that I was still able to get that gorgeous orangey color of the moon, but yet when you look at the size of that moon and you look at the size of those buildings, it's dwarfing those buildings. So the moon looks absolutely huge. And how many people say, oh my gosh, the moon is so big tonight? And depending on where you're standing, yes, it will certainly look big. Some people may say, well, it's just a regular moon to me. And it's got a lot to do with a scale, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing I want to talk to you about as well, as you'll also notice, is at this low in the horizon, lots of times, depending on how much atmosphere we got to shoot through and how much turbulence is in the air, you won't even see a round circle. The moon will look out of shape, very distorted. If you look at that closely, it's a very distorted looking moon. And that's because, again, it's all the light that's refracting. It's the moon that's rising. So it's always going to have a funny shape until it gets a certain height in the sky. And then it'll start to take on that nice round ball that we all recognize as the moon. Now, when I talk about the atmosphere and the sky and turbulence and all that stuff, I'm going to show you a little video. And this is actually a video of a crater on the moon. And you can see that there's fleeting seconds of sharpness, and then there's fleeting seconds of total blurriness. So it's almost like looking at pebbles in the bottom of a brook as the water is running over it. And so what's happening here is the reason why I'm shooting this with video. I'm going to put it on pause for a second. When I put that on pause, I'm looking at one frame, the same as you would take your camera and shoot one picture. The thing when you're shooting a picture like that with one frame and you say, well, my pictures are blurry. Why are my pictures of the moon so blurry? Well, there's a couple of things that will cause it. One is this atmospheric distortion. So as you can see here, as I can move this around and I can look for a frame. There's a relatively clear one there. So if I shot the moon, say 10, 15, 20 times, I might find a couple of really good frames out of that 15, 20 that I could say, you know what? Yeah, that looks like a good frame. I can use that. But if I don't, then I could be just taking that shot, and just in that one shot, I just happen to get atmospheric noise in there, and it's going to look blurry. Now, you got to remember, this is a really zoomed in photo of the moon, so it won't be this drastic, but it will take the sharpness away from your image. Another reason why you're going to see that, a blurry moon, is because our shutter speed is probably too slow. If we're handhelding, which a lot of people do, they'll grab a very long focal length camera, they'll hand hold it, they'll point it at the moon, and they'll take their picture, but they can't get a clear picture because if your shutter speed is too slow, the moon itself moves quite fast across the sky, so you got to deal with that. And you also got this atmospheric distortion as well. So there's a couple of reasons why you may get some blurry pictures. So the fix to that, of course, is to use a shutter speed, somewhere around 800, 1/800th of a second or faster on a very long focal length camera. And most of the times, if you're hand holding, it'll take care of that. I'm going to cover the settings and stuff a little later. So that would be another reason for being blurry. Or if you're the type of person who likes to shoot the moon in your car, you say, oh my gosh, what a beautiful moon. I'm driving around. It's cold out. My car's nice and toasty warm. I roll down that window. I take out my camera. I point it up at the moon. And all I get are these blurry shots, even though my car's turned off and there's no vibration. Well, what's happening there is the heat of your car has heated up your lens. You stick your lens out the window, and now you're seeing heat current coming off of your lens. So it takes a while. So it's pretty hard to get a lens right out of the car and get a clear moonshot inside your car because you're going to run into that problem. So those are a few reasons why you might be getting a blurry moon. All right, so a lot of people ask, does the moon get smaller as it rises? No, it doesn't. And this is the interesting thing about this phenomena. So this is what we call the moon illusion. And this is one of the things that we play with when we get these amazing photographs, and we'll cover that. So there's no physical change. The moon does not change size. And the angular diameter is consistent. When the moon is low, the brain compares it to the foreground objects, like the trees in this example, and perceived distance when it's high in the sky. So when there's no anything in the foreground, the brain lacks the ability to sense what is big in comparison to something else. We don't have that scale. So I just want to show quickly, if you're using various lenses with a full frame camera, this is kind of what you're going to be dealing with. So this black space is a full frame, and all of the little circles that you see are a variety of lenses taking picture of, in this case it was the sun, I believe, but the sun and the moon are the same angular size to us on Earth, so it doesn't matter. So if you look at this moon, this is 100 millimeters, and that's really small in that big frame. Now you remember the picture that I showed you earlier of the moon that was here. So that would have been taken with a wide angle lens, probably maybe at 70 millimeters. So when it gets that small in the sky, when you're using a short focal length, your moon's not going to be very big. Here, on the other hand, is the total opposite. With a 500 millimeter lens, I was able to magnify the moon, but you're also magnifying everything else that goes along with it. So there's your field of view. So if you're using a full frame sensor, um, with a 200 millimeter lens, that's what the moon will look like. If you're using a crop sensor, which is an APS-C size sensor, the smaller sensors that are in most camera bodies, 135 millimeter lens will give you the same equivalency as a 200 millimeter in a full frame. So, so you can see the difference between 200 millimeters in a full frame versus 2000 millimeters, which would be a telescope in a full frame. So you can see there's a lot of different ways to magnify that moon. So depending on what you want to do, this is how it's going to actually play out. So there are a checklist of items that you're going to want to go out and take your moon photos. You're going to want a camera body, one that you can change lenses on. So, you can have a variety of different shots should you like to. The most important part is going to be the telephoto lens itself. If you want to get those nice close-up shots, a lens that's going to be between 200 and 500 millimeters to be able to get you something close. If it's only 200 millimeters, you can put on what they call an extender, and like a 2x extender, and you could actually turn it into a 400 millimeter lens. It's like an extender that'll make the lens be twice the power that it is. So that's an important part of taking some of these photos. You want a solid tripod that's not going to shake on you, because if there's a little bit of wind or some turbulence in the air, if you got a tripod that's really rickety, your pictures will probably end up being blurry. You're going to want a remote release. The remote release is going to allow you to take the shots without actually touching the camera body so that your photos are nice and sharp. If you don't have a remote release, most cameras have a self-timer, or if you have a current camera, a new camera, most of those are Wi-Fi or Bluetooth anyway, and you can operate them with your phone. You're going to want extra batteries, because when you're out shooting the moon, that time of the night starts to cool down, and cold air loves batteries, and the batteries don't like cold air. So your batteries won't last quite as long under colder conditions. So make sure you have extra batteries and they're fully charged. And of course, make sure you have your memory cards, and have a couple on hand in case you get a card that for some reason goes corrupt on you. You want to make sure you got a backup. And what I mean by clear memory is that make sure your cards are free of any pictures, because you don't want to go to the end of it and all of a sudden say card full. That's what we don't want. Camera settings, a starting point for a moon shot like this would be the exposure should be 1/100th of a second if you're on a tripod, 1/800th of a second if you're hand holding. But most cases, these scenes here that we're going to shoot are typically going to be on a tripod. Aperture between f6.3 and f11. And again, you can adjust that back and forth to make sure that it works for your particular camera and lens combination. And start around ISO 400 to 16 or 800 to 1600, depending on the time of the night that it is that you're shooting this. But typically with the blue hour, there's a fair bit of light, but you may need a little help with your ISO, but just keep an eye on that so that you're able to get the detail in the moon like you see here without blowing that out, because that's going to be what you want to be able to get this all with one shot. So here's an example of that thing. So this particular shot, I used a 500 millimeter lens, and I shot it at about 400 millimeters. And you're going to notice that how small the houses are and how large the moon looks. And the reason that's the case is because I was across the river from this ferry landing. So these houses were, especially this one up here, was probably close to, maybe 1.5 miles away. It was quite a long distance away. The further away you can get your foreground, the larger your moon is going to look in comparison to it, because the moon does not change size, even though it looks big on the horizon. Again, it's big because it's in comparison to something that you're looking at. So the further away you can get your foreground, the larger the moon is going to look. And you can get these absolutely wonderful pictures where the lights are just coming on, the house lights are coming on at night, but there's still enough light during blue hour to get that absolutely beautiful foreground. Full blood moons are another thing you can do. I won't get into those, but these are some of the moon phases that you can get into taking. And this is all done with a long lens. In other words, a 500 millimeter lens. I think at this point, I'm going to stop it here because we've covered an awful lot in there. The main thing was the settings in the camera, having a little idea of knowing that the moon itself does not change size. We can magnify it with our lens, but to make the moon look large on the horizon, we need to get farther away as we can from whatever our foreground is. Make it smaller because the moon never changes size. Smaller it is, the larger the moon is in terms of its scale. So that's basically the trick behind doing that. And plan your shot. Go out for a drive in the middle of the day. Know where east is. There's a plan called Photo Pills, an app that you can use, and you can actually take that app, set it up, and you can say, okay, the moon's going to be up at such and such a time. That's when my moonrise is going to be. It'll actually tell you that too, and then be in that area that you are in, and you can just hold the phone up, and it will show you where the moon is going to rise in that spot. So if you are wanting it to catch it over a building or over a mountaintop or something like that, that app called Photo Pills would be a great one for you to use to be able to catch that moon. So plan it up, get the right lens for the thing. Again, the 100 to 500 is good because you can zoom in and zoom out between 100 and 500, or even 100 to 400. So you can get a variety of shots, variety of sizes. So if you want a wide landscape and a smaller moon in the picture, or if you want the larger moon, dwarfing something in the foreground, that lens is the most flexible that you can use. So other than that, that's my time I have today. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. Again, Snapshots and Stories is here every week, and we will see you next week. So for now, so long, and we'll see you next week.